Hi, third grade. Miss Fidazzo here today to help you with your great writing assignment that you have in your pink writing folder today. Today is your lucky day. After all, it is St. Patrick's Day, and we are going to write an opinion piece using details from Who Was Frederick Douglass to support our opinions. Here is our task for the day. It's called a difficult decision. In 1845, Frederick published a book called The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This was a brave thing to do because it put him in even more danger. Considering he had a family, do you think he did the right thing? Choose which side you are on and list your points to support your opinion. Use these points to write an argument to get others to agree with you. Okay, so the question is, should Frederick Douglass have published that book in 1845? You're either going to go with, yes, I think he did the right thing and published his book, or you might think, no, that was a dangerous thing for him to do. He should not have done that. But before you make your opinion, be sure that you can support it with details from the text. If you happen to have your Who Was Frederick Douglass novel, you can find some good supporting details on pages 66 through 69. But we're all going to take a look at those pages together. Just to recap, here's what happened on those pages. It says, in 1845, Frederick published The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This book revealed the facts he had withheld for 4 years, his real name and where he was from. The one thing he did not describe was his escape to protect other slaves who might try to escape the same way. Narrative was an instant bestseller. It was especially popular in the North and steered more people to the anti-slavery cause. But Frederick was now in even more danger. Though he had many powerful friends who would protect him, that didn't mean a slave catcher couldn't trap him and spirit him away. The idea of being captured haunted Frederick. By law, he still belonged to the Alds. After making sure that the money from his book sales would go directly to Anna, his wife, Frederick left the household in her capable hands and fled to England. There, and in Ireland and Scotland, he gave speeches in nearly all the large cities and towns, asking for help ending American slavery. Already famous in America, Frederick became well known in Europe as well. Frederick was amazed to find that in England, blacks were treated the same as whites. Whether on a train or in a restaurant, hotel, or church, he was welcome without concern for his color. No one insulted him or threw him out, as they often did in America. He felt refreshed and, for the first time, truly free. It was tempting to move his family overseas, but Frederick felt he must go home. How else could he help the millions still enslaved? Then, my favorite part of the novel, here it is. Then a group of his English friends did something remarkable. They raised money to buy Frederick's freedom from the Alds. And the Alds agreed. In exchange for 150 British pounds, or about $700, Hugh Ald signed papers freeing Frederick forever. Freedom! Now Frederick could devote himself fully to his life's work of ending slavery. After 21 months abroad, Frederick returned to America with plans of starting his own anti-slavery newspaper. He moved his family to Rochester, New York, where there was a strong abolitionist community. Okay, now that we refreshed, now we've got to go back And think about that question. Should Frederick have published his book? If you're thinking yes, then we're going to go back and look at those pages and maybe identify some good supports for you to pick from. Because don't forget, when you're writing today, you need to be very prepared to support your opinion with 2 reasons from the text. So, remember this page. I know there aren't numbers on the screen, but if you're writing and instead of saying on page blank it says, you could simply say in chapter 8, or that's this page, or I think if we move forward, we get to chapter 9. You could quote the chapters, or you could just simply say in the text it says. That's a simple way to do it. Okay, but on this page, let's think about those people who think, yes, Frederick Douglass should have published his book. Why? Well, what are some positives here? One thing I picked out from this page was this. He did not describe his escape. So there was no harm in the information that he gave that would harm other slaves that were trying to escape, because he didn't mention anything about that Underground Railroad, did he? Okay, so that's something, that there was no harming other people who might be trying to get to freedom. Okay. Another thing that I saw was, really big thing in my opinion, that this book was a bestseller and it helped steer more people to the anti-slavery cause. Now that these people were reading his book and seeing all of the facts that Frederick Douglass is revealing, they're very concerned about the reality of slavery. And now more people, especially in the North, are very much growing more and more against slavery, which is a great thing. On this, okay, so this is chapter 6. So that other page was chapter 5. Now, on this particular page, I think there's some proof that says, yes, he should have published his book because Frederick was amazed to find out when he fled to England that blacks were treated the same as whites. Okay, this was something inspiring that Frederick learned of after he published his book and had to flee to England because he was afraid of being caught. If he would have never gone to England, he might not have seen that life could, in fact, be different because in England it was. He was treated the same. And finally, one of the other huge reasons that I think you could argue that Frederick should have published his book is this. When he was in England, his group of friends eventually raised enough money to buy Frederick's freedom from the Alds. So think about it. If Frederick never published his book, he would have never been afraid and fled to England. And if he never went to England, then he might not have ever gotten the money to buy his freedom from the Alds. So you could come to the conclusion that because he published his book, it ultimately led to his freedom, which is a really great thing that came from that. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking, no, Frederick should not have published his book in 1845. But you also must be prepared to support that opinion with 2 reasons from the text. Because I'll be honest with you, boys and girls, there is not a right or a wrong answer. You could certainly write a great paragraph saying, yes, he should have. But you could also certainly write a great paragraph saying, no, I don't feel that Frederick should have published his book. So let's go back and dig for some examples in the text of reasons why maybe he should not have done that. Okay, back here, now we're in chapter 5 again. Let's look and see. What are some negative things that happened? On this page it says, but Frederick was now in even more danger. Because later on it says a slave catcher could trap him and spirit him away, meaning could take him completely away from his family and return him to his slave owner, the Alds, in the South. That's pretty risky that he would risk being caught and taken away from his wife and his children. Now, in chapter 6, I found some more reasons why maybe Frederick should not have published his book, his narrative about his life. And here's what I found. Frederick ended up having to leave the household in his wife Anna's capable hands while he fled to England. So that whole time while he was in England, he had to leave his wife and his children back in America. Could be a reason that he should not have published it in the first place. That's missing a lot of valuable time with your family, don't you think? And on the last page here, I also think that it says that, speaking of what we said on the last page, after 21 months abroad, Frederick finally returned to America. So think about it. Not only did he have to leave his wife and children back in America for a little while, the text says he was gone in England for 21 months. Oh, well, 12 months are in 1 year. So 2 years would be 12 plus 12, which is 24 months. He was nearly there in England, away from his family for almost 2 years. That's a lot that he missed out on in their lives. Now, remember his family there in that portrait. I wanted to remind you that he left his wife Anna and their daughter Rosetta, and actually 4 more children, Louis, Frederick Jr., Charles, and Annie. So he left behind 5 of his children and his wife, all because he had to flee to England. That's something to think about if you're thinking, I don't think Frederick Douglass should have published his book. So now that you are gathering your thoughts and you remember some details in the text, your first step is to complete a graphic organizer that looks like this. Now, if you're a hybrid student, your teacher gave you a packet with this graphic organizer in it that you can use. If you're a full-time remote student, don't panic. This can easily be recreated on a blank piece of paper. All it's asking you to do is state your opinion clearly. Okay, so it's either I believe Frederick should have published his book, or I do not think Frederick should have published his book. Okay, now notice, how many reasons do we want you to provide? 2 of them. Okay, I would definitely remember those transition words that Mrs. Menz has been talking about. Okay, first, okay, for example, then you want your other reason stated, and don't forget to wrap it up and conclude it. Now, once you have your graphic organizer filled out, you want to write your draft to show your teacher. If you're a hybrid student, write on lined paper. Full-time remote students, we won't be able to see your paper and you can't hand it in to us when you're in school, but you could either type it in Schoology or send your teacher a picture of your work, maybe on Class Dojo, if that's easier for you. And don't forget, this is going to be graded. We're nearing the end of the 3rd quarter, and writing is a grade. So make sure, boys and girls, this is your main job for this whole Wednesday. Make sure you're taking your time and working really hard to create a paragraph that you are proud of. So obviously here, we want to shoot for meeting expectations. So anything that's in this column here is what your goal is. You want all your ideas to be related to the topic and provide good supporting details from the text. You want to have an topic sentence, which in this case, you want to state your opinion right off the bat. And don't forget to wrap it up with an in conclusion sentence too. Make sure that your voice is strong. This is your opinion. You want to get others to agree with you, so make sure you are making your voice strong. And lastly, do your very best. It doesn't need to be perfect, but do your very best with spelling and punctuation and all of those things we've been talking about in grammar this year with me. All right, third grade, you have your goal. Work really hard. We cannot wait to read your work, and good luck.